Welcome to TrulyFit.
Eric, thank you so much for joining the TrulyFit Podcast. Why don't you give my audience and listeners a little background on you, your credentials, and your intellectual pursuits, and what brought you to do what it is that you do today?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Steve. My background is I went to Northwestern for undergrad, where I was actually a football player, and my undergrad degree was in a pretty traditional like business organizational change degree, and then it was in my fifth year there. I got my master's in predictive analytics, and that kind of started me on the journey of falling in love with data science and analytics. And from there, I worked a job at DraftKings for a little over 3 years, where I worked in the analytics data science department. And basically, the most interesting thing I did there was I built our player skill models. So basically taking all of like the user bet history data and using that to predict the skill level of players. So like, what is your expected margin if you were to bet, 1 million bets? To kind of parse through the variance will win on a parlay, because that is not likely to continue over time. Yeah. That kind of 4-year period of getting that master's, working at DraftKings, kind of made me fall in love with all things data and the general idea of taking giant sets of complex data and using that to spit out actionable and usable outputs and consumable outputs. And that is kind of the thread that somewhat led me to Consensus, which is what I do now. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Consensus, been working on it full-time for a little over a year now. And what it is a search engine that uses artificial intelligence to find answers in scientific research. The being qualified to do it kind of came from the data science world, but the background, the much further back kind of like backstory of how it all started is I come from a family of academics and researchers, and I was the jock in the family. So I've kind of always had this outsider complex to science, but I always loved science, but I was never an expert myself. And I've always loved consuming content that was effectively experts going through what the research says about subjects. And I wish that I could have that on demand. I wanted to be able at the tips of my fingers, be able to, whenever I have a question, say, what does the science actually say about this? And that was an idea I had 6 or 7 years ago, and then decided to finally attack it during COVID.
Well, most people think that's not an issue. They think that they can already do that, right? They think, okay, if I need the science, I just go to my search engine, I type in what I need to, and it comes up. So what is the problem that you see that you guys are actually solving that the general public doesn't understand?
Yeah, no, great question. The problem is that the ways that we traditionally consume information, like your Google, is not designed to give us good information. It is an advertising business at heart, and there are a ton of ramifications of that. There is the explicit ramification of, if you say, what is the best supplement for anxiety into Google, the first thing you're going to get back is a bunch of advertisements from Athletic Greens. And that is hurting your experience very explicitly, like you're seeing the ads, but there's actually a ton more going on behind the scenes. There's also is making it not be designed to get you the best information. Because they're selling ads, their incentives are to keep you engaged and show you things that you're most likely to click on. That means they're prioritizing popularity. They're not prioritizing reputability. So nothing that you're shown on Google is really, the goal has really been to give you good information. And it's mostly editorialized content and blogs and articles, as opposed to peer-reviewed studies.
And you can game the system by having proper SEO, search engine optimization, as a company, right? So I can go ahead and pay for backlinks and spend a lot of money to climb the ladder. So you guys find a way to kind of circumvent that, to not allow people to do that?
Yeah, we don't show any ads at all. So nothing that decides how things are ranked in our search engine has anything to do with the popularity or the SEO ranking or the domain trust of anything. And then beyond that, it is also only peer-reviewed studies. So it's only scientific documents that are in our search engine. We have no blogs or editorialized articles.
Interesting. So that is your term. So my next question was going to be, science is kind of a blanket or umbrella term.
Yeah.
So it needs to be peer reviewed. That's number one. Are there other criteria that you have that are like musts if it makes it into your algorithm? For example, if I type in something, let's say I wrote a paper on something, and it doesn't show up on your search engine, why not? What did I potentially not have in my paper that didn't make the cut for your search engine?
Yeah, so that isn't exactly the right way to think about it, because the way that the way that our data is populated in our search engine is we have a partnership with a scientific data aggregator. So we have a partnership with an organization called Semantic Scholar, which is a research data aggregator out of the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, which is the Microsoft co-founders' philanthropic research organization. And they have access to about 200 million peer-reviewed papers. And so we have a license with them. We have a partnership where we're actually able to have all of those papers ourselves and use them in our product. So what exists in our product is what Semantic Scholar has access to, which the criteria for that, I don't know every in and out. They're all peer-reviewed papers, but it isn't specifically, you did something wrong. If a paper that you've had published, it might be, there might be copyright rights to that at Elsevier, and they haven't let Semantic Scholar have access to it. So that's why it wouldn't be in our search engine.
Okay. And then once that populates, is everything free, or are there paywalls to get into each individual article based upon where that article is coming from?
Yeah. So you will still see the results even if the underlying article is paywalled. The majority of our database is open access, but there are some where if you follow the link to the full text of the paper, if you don't have a subscription yourself, you don't get it just from using us. And we want to continue to prioritize open access papers. And the good news for us is, the trend is on our side here. I don't know if you've seen in the past few weeks, there was legislation that was passed that every scientific study that has been funded by federal dollars has to be open access by I believe 2025. Wow. So the trend in science is to make things more open, which is the way that it should have always been. In our opinion, it's a public funded enterprise, and it'd be able to be available for anybody to consume. And we want to help make that easier for people.
Is there a fix for the other big tech related industries, whether that be sort of your search engines or maybe just your social media platforms? Do you think there is going to be a fix? Are there going to be more companies like yours coming out trying to solve that problem? Or do you think there's nothing you can do? It's already here to stay. And unless the government goes and takes control over it, which we probably don't want, it's a free market. They control their business.
Yeah, great question. So they're not going away, right? They're such a part of the public ecosystem, and they're not inherently evil by any means. And Google potentially showing bad information to you, it isn't on purpose per se, and it's not this back channel conspiracy. It's just they're all advertising based companies, and that just makes them follow their incentives to try to drive engagement. It just so happens that sometimes the most engaging content is misinformation, right? Like that's why things get prioritized on Facebook that are misinformation, because their algorithm is saying this is what you're most likely to engage with, and that's what they prioritize. But they do really, really great at other things, right? Like if you want to just type into Google, just asking a widely known fact and say, when was Queen Elizabeth's birthday? Like that's what Google should exist for. That's great. It will give you that answer. But it is our opinion that there will be disruption in a lot of these big tech players, and the disruption will come from companies that have a value prop that is antithetical to them. So, I'll speak to search, and I can speak a little bit to some of the other social media and some of the things we're seeing. We think that premium ad-free subscription search is going to disrupt Google over the next 10 to 20 years. Again, not saying that Google's going to go away. They'll still be a multi-billion-dollar company 10 times over. But as more and more people learn about the filter that they get their information through, and as the technology that allows for this to happen, the world of natural language processing, which is exploding right now, continues to get better and better. The offering of these premium search engines can become more viable and more enticing for people, where they'd be willing to pay a small fee for it, where they no longer will have to see ads, and the product can do what it's really intended to do, which would be, in our case, giving you good scientific information. But there'll be other premium search engines that will pop up. And, I think the first step of this was like the privatized subscription search, like DuckDuckGo
Yeah.
and Neeva.com is another one. Those are giant companies already, and all they really do is make it. DuckDuckGo is just privatized. Neeva is like a user curated search. It also is private with no ads, and they're billion-dollar companies just because their value prop is, hey, we're not Google that's showing you stuff. And then I think there's going to be this new wave of what we hope to be a part of, which is the next step, which is where they're really helping you accomplish some specific task, and they do that really well, where you pay a small fee. And then in social media, you're starting to see this too. The two hottest apps right now are, one of them is called Be Real and the other one is called Gas. And both of their value props are basically just humane social media. So Be Real, if you're familiar with Be Real, it's this like kind of Instagram knockoff in some ways, where you can only post in a 2-minute window per day. And it's meant to just be like, you can't, set up this intricate Instagram beautiful post. It's just like, show your friends what you're doing. And it's exploding. Like, all my friends have it, and it's got millions of users. And then Gas just released recently, and I believe it's like the #1 app in the world right now. And it's they're kind of going the Facebook route. They're targeting young people first, and they're like partnering with schools. And it's like an anonymous compliment app. And they're kind of intermixing some things of like Facebook with some things of like Tinder. Like you can like have like secret crushes and admirers, but they only let you say, it's like gas you up, like is the the young people phrase. So that's why it's called the Gas app, and it's all about like compliments. So anyway, I think the interesting part of all that is there's these new things popping up that their whole value prop is just, hey, we're not big tech, and we don't have these. Our ethos is like promote goodness in the world, and people are loving it.
Yeah, and it's such a moving target when you think about the demographics coming down the road. What programs are they using now? What social media that's sort of annoying them, right? I would have never thought that nobody was going to use Facebook. When I first got to college, that's when Facebook exploded. And now, ask a kid who's 18 years old, if he's on Facebook, no is typically the answer more often than not, right? So like these things are just moving targets because of whatever's trending, or too much stuff has been thrown at them. So there's been too much of this fake sort of Instagram lifestyle posts that people are just getting sick of. So now they goes the other direction, right? The younger people coming in and say, we don't want that. We just want 2 minutes of a quick, this is what our real lives look like. And it's sort of hard to predict that, but it's fun and it's exciting.
Totally. Yeah. The Facebook thing is hilarious, that somehow the app that started with students in schools has turned into the app that it's only like 60-year-olds on it now.
Yeah.
Kind of a hilarious trajectory.
Yeah. Most of the messages I get on Facebook are either former clients of mine or family members over the age of 60 telling me that their account was hacked. And what they mean by that is that they just clicked on the wrong thing and somebody sent them a weird email. So I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook, but you mentioned NLP. Can you describe that in sort of layman's terms for my audience?
Yeah, so NLP is natural language processing, and it is a subset of artificial intelligence that has to do with human language. So it's machines' ability to understand and process and analyze text and language. And the way that we're seeing that pop up, and what the reason why it's exploding is the advent of large language models. And I'm sure if you've been on Twitter and you follow any people in the tech world, if you've seen the tool called DALL-E, where you can type in a prompt and it will spit you out an image, an AI generated picture. That is the underlying technology, is large language models there. And basically they're these giant text models that are trained on basically the entire internet worth of text, where they basically, the way that they're taught is they're shown billions and billions of words across the internet, and then they'll blank out certain words and they'll ask the model to try to predict what word is missing, so that over time it learns like the way language works. And it's done that over basically the entire internet, and that is it comes pre-trained with that. So like the big innovation is basically these models have this underlying knowledge of that, and then you can take them and teach them how to do specific tasks, a variety of different tasks. So that comes with this like base layer knowledge, and then you can fine tune it to do specific things. So like in our case, that's reading through scientific documents and pulling out the interesting parts where authors are stating their claims. In other cases, it could be creating marketing copy where you say, I want to describe a product with a happy tone that is a fitness podcast. And then it will spit out you a generated marketing copy for something like that.
Wow.
And basically, yeah, it's able to do that because it comes with this robust understanding of knowledge, and then you can train it to do your specific tasks. And yeah, it is exploding everywhere in the tech world right now.
Will there even be bloggers? I mean, what's the point of me sitting down to write a blog if I can simply just say what you did? It can scan the internet and write the blog for me. Does that just take that job away?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't do that in real time, scan the internet. That is actually how it basically comes to you.
Okay.
And then you would give it examples of prompt and output. And then using that underlying knowledge, it would then learn how to do that task, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny that, everyone used to hypothesize about AI and the last place that it's going to go is these subjective creative domains, writing and art. And yeah, now that's just not true. That's exactly what it's doing. And it's, you can find stories of students using it to write papers and getting A's on papers.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And, there's so much more information now on the internet for this NLP sort of program to ingest and then take out, right? So every time I do a podcast, I transcribe it. I use something called otter.ai. It transcribes my audio. I put it on there. So it's reading all of that and taking real conversations also into account, right? Not just people writing, because there is a difference in language as far as speaking and writing. I wonder if it gets to that extent where it can tell the difference between those two.
Certainly. And yeah, that what you just gave is another example of an NLP product that can transcribe text and take in speech and turn it into text.
Yeah.
There's so many different interesting applications. And what you said is totally true. Yeah, as the internet just continues to grow, there's more and more ways for it to learn. And that is why we've seen these image generator models, because there's this whole internet of 1 billion images with captions on them. And that is perfect training data for those. It has an image, it has the description. It can now learn exactly, given description, what to do with an image. And that's why these image generator models are so good already.
Is there anything else in the sort of health and fitness world that you think is going to be really changed over the next 5 to 10 years, whether it's NLP or something Consensus is doing that you haven't already mentioned?
Yeah. As far as it relates to NLP, I'm going to be extremely biased because what we are doing, one of our biggest early use cases are people who are interested in evidence-based health and fitness. And I think using this technology to get layman's better scientific insights whenever they want is going to be a real innovation. We hope to be a part of that, where there's a huge boom, as I'm sure in evidence-based health, whether it's the Huberman Lab podcast or Peter Attia's newsletter. Personalities like that, those weren't people who were famous 10 years ago, but now there's this whole culture of them. And I think it's great. For the most, there's obviously some charlatans involved as well, but the good ones, it's a great thing, right? It's these experts teaching you how to, be healthy based on what the research says. And we want to be able to build the tools that allow people to do that at the tips of their fingers. And these large language models, will enable that so that anybody can learn, what does the research say about my health and fitness questions? And I think an interesting intersection will be that how this will potentially interact with like wearables, because wearables is another way that technology has impacted the health and wellness space, right? It's another big boom over the last 5 years. And there's definitely gonna be some room for synergy there, where it's like, given my metrics, what does the research say I should be doing, and kind of unifying those two bits of technology.
Yeah, that's great information. And my brain was going, okay, also, where does this fuse with the health world? Let's say, as we start to get more of this evidence-based, whether it's nutrition or personal training, fitness-based stuff,
Yep.
does that eventually lead into, and this I'm just spitballing here, there being sort of healthcare coverage based around these stuff, right? Because right now the fitness world is sort of seen as, this is just a leisure product.
Yeah.
Going to your personal trainer, even going to a registered dietitian, you can't get coverage from sort of your medical sense and insurance. But eventually, we're going to have enough of this information where that may change. That landscape may change.
Yeah, and it's a great point, and that isn't exactly where my mind went, because, like you just said, like when I think of health and wellness, you think of it in all these products, you think of it on like this personal level. But one of the biggest and most powerful applications of AI that's already starting to happen is in the more in the more traditional healthcare world, where they're using it. AI can be used to take in a bunch of patient data and make predictions on what the what the disease is. It can look at X-rays and try to predict what you see on the X-ray, and it can find tumors that the human eye can't see. So I think there's so much that can be done with the more advanced data we have on people and symptoms and diseases. The better technology can potentially be at helping us find cures and the best treatments for certain things.
I was listening to a radiologist talk about the AI that's involved now with X-rays and MRIs and those sorts of things. And it's funny to see that they couldn't even predict what the AI was going to do necessarily. So they took 10,000 images and they put it through this AI to see if it knew what was going on. I think they were actually scanning the eyeball, and it with a 99% prediction rate, which no person can do, it actually told the gender. It could tell the difference between a male and a female by looking at the eyeball somehow. And they weren't trying to do that, right? That wasn't the objective. That was a sort of a side piece of information that was filled out. So I guess there's things that you couldn't even imagine that the AI is going to learn how to discover.
Certainly. Well, first off, I'm interested to learn what qualities of our eyeballs make it able to predict if you're a male or female. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I said earlier, like this is a different example, but it's similar to what you're saying. And I think there's a lesson to be learned about these types of technologies, that, everyone's prediction was that AI was going to come last for subjective creative domains, and that is just not happening whatsoever. And you should just never, it always happens in ways that we don't think it's going to happen. And it's always going to help us and pop up in ways that we could never have predicted. And it's kind of a fool's, it's fun to make predictions, but we should never think that we know the future of this technology, because it's so powerful. It can surprise us in so many ways. And, there's a positive spin on that in many ways, both in terms of how cool certain applications could be, but also everyone, you could find these doomsday videos on YouTube about everyone's going to be out of a job. Like the reality is, like, we don't know what the landscape's going to be in 10 years, and there'll be a whole other sector of jobs that pop up that we probably have no idea what they are now, that are, the AI handholders or overseers or data creators, right? Like with new technology comes new economic opportunities. So, I think it's sometimes a fool's errand to try to predict like we know what the future with this when technology is this powerful.
Speaking of predictions and forecasting, I'm going to jump over to sports now. Vegas makes predictions and forecasts. They point spreads. I know you were doing similar things, I'm sure, with DraftKings. You have to, right? The amount of points that whatever wide receiver or quarterback's going to score on any given day, based upon certain metrics. So you can talk a little bit about that, but I also want to talk football. Why is it that football maybe hasn't caught up to baseball and some of these other sports in metrics? Northwestern, where you played, good program. Let's go ahead and say you were playing Northeastern. You'd be a 30, 40-point favorite versus Northeastern. Why wouldn't Northeastern run hook and ladders and not punt and never really run their traditional offense, come out in something totally different? Because it's a high risk, but it's also a high reward, and they have no chance of winning. But I don't see that. I see these 40 and 30-point underdogs just playing a normal football game and always losing.
Wow, yeah, you're speaking my language. Well, first off, Northeastern disbanded their football team over a decade ago, so that would be an impossible matchup. But if we did play them, we would have been significant favorites because they were not Division 1A.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. So first, why football hasn't caught up to as much as a sport like baseball, I'll address that. The answer is like pretty simple. It's nuanced, but like the simplest thing is baseball just translates itself to being statistically analyzed better than any sport possible. It is like a binary game. Did you get a hit? Did you get on base, or did you not?
Sure.
Everything can be looked at as a spreadsheet, and there's basically no context that needs to be layered in. You can understand the baseball game nearly in its entirety just by looking at the stat sheet. Football is a bunch of the other sports kind of fit somewhere in between. Like basketball is a really nice kind of middle ground where it's a little bit of both. Football is like the full opposite end of the spectrum for the most part, where there's so much context and there's so much variance in outcomes. You can look at the stats of a game, and a team could outgain another team by 250 yards and they could still lose.
Sure.
And there's no equivalent to that in baseball. So that's the number one. It makes it a lot easier to evaluate players and do the Moneyball experiment, because you can just quantify players. And you need to watch the film and understand, the impact of the offensive lineman on the play. But where that is changing and where that isn't true is in-game decision making, because there are many things we can quantify. And it's one of the things that I get really frustrated with seeing coaches making conservative decisions on punting on fourth down or kicking field goals, because this is like the one part of football, like we have all the data. We have the win probability models that basically tell that it's a solved problem. It tells you what you should do, yet coaches still are too conservative, which will get me to the last point you made about why don't teams that are bigger underdogs play with more variance in their play styles. I think they 100% should. I've had this conversation many times that if I was a coach of a college football program, I would want to know the point spread, and you should be humble about it. And you should say, okay, if we're these huge underdogs, like they're better, they're more talented. Let's play a game that is conducive to more variance. But the reason coaches don't do that is because if you've ever played high level sports, especially football, the coaches are very stubborn. And the idea of being humble and being like, this team is better and more talented than us is the most taboo idea in the world. And every coach ever is like, we'll just run our stuff. And if we execute, we can beat them. Like that is what the coach answer is. I think that's stupid.
Yeah.
Because there are differences between teams, and you can make yourself more likely to win by playing with a more aggressive style. And that, I think, that generally is why coaches don't follow the analytics book, because they have this old school mentality, we just need to execute. And they also are very conservative when it comes to their job security. And, a perfect example of this is coaches who are down, let's say they're down by 14 points and they have the ball in their own territory with 3 minutes to go. And it's 4th and 10 at their own 20. Most coaches will still punt. But if you punt, your probability of winning is basically 0. If you go for it, is your probability still low of winning? Yes. But maybe it's 8% now if you go for it and get it. Yet most coaches will still punt. And the reason why is because they're like, 21-point loss is worse than a 14-point loss.
No.
It's still a loss. And that's all that really actually matters. But coaches are so conservative about, what makes them look bad and job security. And yeah, they kind of just default to this conservative way of thinking. It is changing. It is changing for the positive, but not changing as fast as it should be, in my opinion.
Well, also, too, if you're in that position where you're down 14, there's a certain amount of time, you have the metrics. The idea would be on 3rd down to run a play in which now your 4th down is shorter, right? So, and 3rd down, I'm going to run a draw. I'm not going to throw the ball on 3rd and 8. I'm going to run a draw, get 4 yards. So now my 4th and 4, I have a higher chance of getting that. And I should be doing that too. And I don't think coaches are always thinking 2 downs ahead. That seems to be another problem. But
yeah, and you definitely see coaches starting to do that more of planning ahead and saying we're going to have 4 downs here so that I can dictate some of the play calling. However, I would push back because I do think that it is the data always says the best way to achieve a 1st down is to throw past the sticks, and teams should stop throwing freaking screens on 3rd and 15 because they don't work according to the data.
Okay, well, I'll trust you and trust the data there, but I do think it is really a mentality thing, like you said, because you will have coaches who are huge underdogs who decide, let's go ahead and say they run the spread. They're going to, you know what? First drive, we're going to come out, we're going to run triple option. They won't be expecting it. We're going to get under center, we're going to do this. But that's it. After the first drive, whether it stalls or doesn't.
That's what they plan, and then they default to what they know.
And it's like, well, if you're really breaking that mentality down, if the whole purpose of that is to confuse them, why not stick with the confusion plan and make sure you continue to do things differently? But like you said, it's a mentality thing. It's a stubborn thing.
The amount of times you will hear, if you spend time around a football program, it's like, just run our stuff and all we got to do is execute and we'll win. Like, it's just, in a perfect world, yes, but that's not the way the world works. And you need to be more self-aware than that.
Yeah, not when Alabama's playing Louisiana Tech.
Exactly.
Maybe. Yeah.
I don't care what you execute. You're going to lose. The only way you're going to win is if some weird stuff happens. Play a style that's going to possibly allow for that weird stuff to happen.
Eric, this was fantastic information. Can you give my audience some more information as far as where they can find Consensus, where they can maybe find you if they want to reach out to you for a question, whether that's your own personal social media and whatever other realm you have to drive us to?
Yeah, so go visit Consensus. It's consensus.app. It is completely free right now to create an account and search. And one of our best early use cases are people who are interested in evidence-based health and wellness. Now, you can go to our engine and type in a plain English research question. Say, hey, does creatine help with athletic performance? Or is magnesium good for sleep? You can type in these questions in plain English, and we will return you insights directly from research. So if that's something that sounds interesting, go over to consensus.app, create your free account, and start asking questions. Definitely also follow us on Twitter. That's the best way to reach me because I'm on our Twitter all day @ConsensusNLP. Give us a follow. If you have any questions, DM us. Our DMs are open. And yeah, we'd love to get some of these listeners in our community.
My guest today has been Eric Olson. Eric, thank you so much for joining the TrulyFit Podcast.
Thanks, Steve. It was great.